Amara stood silently by the tall glass window of her husband's family mansion, the soft golden sunlight spilling over her brown skin, glowing with quiet strength that no one in that house ever truly saw. The city skyline stretched far in front of her, a world she had fought to enter, but one that never really welcomed her. Behind her, laughter echoed, cruel, dismissive, and cold. It was the kind of laughter that stung more than any insult could. Her husband's family, the proud, wealthy Carter family, sat around the long dining table, mocking her behind polished smiles. "Oh, Amara," sneered Vanessa, her husband's sister, her diamond earrings swinging with arrogance. "You really wore that dress to dinner? How brave," the others chuckled. Amara's husband, Daniel, shifted awkwardly, pretending not to hear. It wasn't the first time he had stayed silent. It wouldn't be the last. Inside, Amara's heart trembled, not with weakness, but with the strength of a storm waiting to be unleashed. She remembered her mother's words, whispered years ago in a small kitchen in Lagos. "Never let their laughter define your worth, my daughter. One day they'll choke on it." That day wasn't here yet, but it was coming. The Carters were an empire, old money, deep connections, and a dangerous kind of pride. They had built their fortune in international real estate and oil, owning half the skyline that Amara was staring at. They looked at her as if she were an accident in their perfect world, a black woman who didn't belong at their golden table. They never saw the degrees she earned, the sleepless nights she spent studying under flickering lights, or the quiet power in her intellect. To them, she was just Daniel's mistake. "You know," Vanessa continued, sipping her wine, "we all thought Daniel would marry someone from his level, someone from our circle. But love makes people do strange things." The others laughed again. Daniel forced a weak smile, but his eyes told Amara he was ashamed, not of them, but of her. That cut deeper than their words. Later that night, Amara stood alone on the mansion balcony, the city wind brushing against her face. Her tears didn't fall, they burned. She had once believed love could conquer class, color, and cruelty. But love had become a cage, and silence had become her only escape. As the stars blinked above, Amara made a silent promise, not revenge but redemption. She would rise, not to destroy, but to prove that the woman they mocked could command boardrooms, sign billion-dollar deals, and reshape the very world they thought she didn't belong to. The next morning, Amara walked into the Carter's company headquarters, not as a wife tagging along, but as a strategist. She had studied finance, investment, and international development. She had an idea, a massive project to attract sustainable investment into Africa's emerging markets. She presented it to the board, a mix of older men who barely hid their skepticism. "We appreciate your enthusiasm," one of them said, smiling tightly, "but our focus is on legacy assets, not charity work. Charity, that's what they called progress." Amara didn't argue. She simply nodded, thanked them, and left. But inside her something awakened, a quiet fire that whispered, "They will remember your name." For the next 6 months, Amara worked in silence. Every night after Daniel slept, she stayed awake, building a business plan that would shake the world. She reached out to contacts, investors who believed in innovation, not old money. One name kept appearing, Global Horizon Ventures, a powerful investment group known for massive deals in emerging markets. Amara sent her proposal to their chairman, a man who rarely took meetings, but something about her plan intrigued him. 2 weeks later, she was on a flight to Singapore, carrying only her laptop, her vision, and her mother's prayer beads. The meeting was tense, high stakes, and electric. The chairman, a stern man with silver hair, listened in silence as Amara spoke. Her voice didn't shake, it soared. She talked about potential, untapped markets, clean energy, African innovation, and human dignity. When she finished, there was a moment of silence so thick she could hear her heartbeat. Then the chairman smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "How much are you asking for?" he asked. Amara took a deep breath. $1 billion, she said. The board members exchanged glances, half amused, half curious. "You think we'll give you $1 billion for an idea?" one of them asked. Amara met his gaze. No, she said calmly. You'll invest $1 billion because it's not just an idea, it's the future. When she returned home a week later, the Carters were hosting another one of their lavish dinners. Vanessa was bragging about a small acquisition deal, the family beaming with pride. Amara, she said mockingly, still playing businesswoman? Amara smiled softly. Something like that, she replied. Before Vanessa could respond, Daniel's phone buzzed. His face went pale. The room fell silent as he read the message. Dad, he stammered. You need to see this. Mr. Carter took the phone, his brow furrowing. Then slowly his eyes widened. The headline read, Global Horizon. Ventures announces $1 billion. Partnership with independent strategist Amara Carter. The room froze. Vanessa's glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. Amara stood there, calm, composed, radiant. Looks like someone believed in my little idea, she said softly. The next day, her name was everywhere, business magazines, television, and financial news. She wasn't just a headline. She was a revolution. Her $1 billion investment would not only build new industries but change the narrative of African potential. And suddenly, the Carters' empire, once untouchable, began to tremble. Investors started calling Amara directly. The family's influence began to fade under the weight of her rising. Star, Daniel, the man who once looked at her with quiet shame, now looked at her with awe and fear. That night, Amara returned to the same balcony where she once cried. But this time her heart was light. The city lights below seemed to bow to her, reflecting her victory. Her mother's words echoed again. One day, they'll choke on their laughter. And indeed they did. Amara didn't just win for herself. She won for every woman who was told she didn't belong. She turned pain into power, silence into strategy, and insult into empire. As she gazed at the horizon, the same silver glow that once felt distant now felt like her own reflection. She smiled, not out of pride, but peace. The world had finally seen her worth, but she had known it all along. Her story wasn't just about revenge. It was about resilience. It was proof that grace could conquer greed, and intelligence could outshine arrogance. The world had changed, and so had Amara. Just months ago, she'd been standing in the shadow of her husband's family, mocked, dismissed and underestimated. Now she was standing in front of international press cameras, shaking hands with ministers, global CEOs and philanthropists. Her $1 billion investment initiative had not only made her one of the most influential women in the corporate world, but also the symbol of a new age, one where brilliance had no color, no gender, and no limits. Yet behind every smile and handshake, there was a storm still brewing. The Carter family's empire was collapsing under its own arrogance, and fate was about to give them a taste of humility that money could never buy. News spread quickly that Amara's project had drawn investors away from Carter Holdings. Their old, outdated oil-based ventures were being replaced by Amara's green energy, expansion across Africa and Asia. Within weeks, their stock plummeted. The same business media that once worshipped the Carters now hailed Amara as the queen of sustainable power. Reporters began calling her the woman who built a future from the ashes of tradition. Every headline echoed the same message. Don't underestimate the woman you once laughed at. At first, Daniel tried to reach her. He sent flowers, messages, even showed up at her office once, pleading, Amara, please, we can fix this together. My family was wrong. I was wrong. But Amara looked at him, calm and unmoved. You stood there when they laughed at me, she said softly. You didn't have to fight them, Daniel. You just had to stand with me. But you didn't. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried the weight of every tear she'd ever swallowed. Now I stand alone, and I stand taller than I ever have. Daniel lowered his eyes, realizing he had lost far more than money. He had lost a woman whose strength could have built them a kingdom. Meanwhile, inside the Carter mansion, chaos was unfolding. Vanessa was furious, her pride wounded. That woman destroyed everything. She screamed at her father. We should have never let Daniel marry her. Mr. Carter slammed his fist on the table. "We didn't lose because of Amara," he said bitterly. "We lost because we got lazy. We stopped seeing the world changing around us." It was the first time he had spoken, truthfully in years, but his words came too late. The banks were calling, investors were leaving, and the empire that once defined them was crumbling like dust. Amara, on the other hand, didn't celebrate their downfall. That wasn't who she was. She focused on growth, on impact, on building something that would outlive every insult ever thrown her way. Her billion-dollar project created jobs, schools, and opportunities in communities that had been ignored for decades. She visited villages, met with young girls, and told them her story. Not to boast, but to show them what faith, resilience, and courage could do. "When they laugh at you," she told them, "just smile, because one day their laughter will be the soundtrack to your success." Her words lit fires in hearts that had long been silent. One evening, as Amara prepared for a gala in her honor, she received an unexpected call. It was Mr. Carter. His voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Amara," he said, "I owe you an apology." There was a long pause. "I used to think strength came from control. But watching you, I realized real strength comes from grace. You didn't destroy us. We destroyed ourselves." Amara listened in silence. For the first time, she didn't feel anger, only peace. "Mr. Carter," she said gently, "sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters." The old man sighed. "You're right, my dear. I hope you never forget that your kindness is your greatest power." When the call ended, Amara stood quietly, tears glimmering in her eyes. She had won, not by revenge, but by wisdom. At the gala that night, she walked in wearing a flowing white gown, symbolizing peace and new beginnings. Cameras flashed, applause roared, and for the first time, she felt free. Not because the world finally accepted her, but because she no longer needed its approval. As she stood on stage to deliver her speech, her voice carried calm authority. "There was a time," she began, "when I was laughed at for dreaming too big. But dreams don't belong to those who mock. They belong to those who dare." The crowd erupted in applause. "I stand here not as a woman who crushed an empire," she continued, smiling, "but as a woman who learned that the only empire worth building is one that uplifts others." Across the room, Daniel stood near the back, watching her. He had aged in those few months, the guilt visible in his eyes. As she finished her speech, their eyes met for a fleeting moment. She smiled, not out of love or resentment, but closure. He nodded slowly, tears welling up. They both knew some stories don't end in reconciliation. They end in realization. Months later, Amara launched her own foundation for women in business, called the Rise Initiative. Within a year, it had funded over 300 startups led by women from marginalized backgrounds. Her name became synonymous with empowerment and vision. She was invited to speak at the United Nations, where she declared, "The world doesn't need saviors. It needs believers, people who believe in equality, opportunity, and humanity." Her words trended globally, inspiring millions. But one day, as she sat in her office overlooking the skyline, she received a simple envelope. No logo, no signature. Inside was an old photo, her at that dinner years ago, standing awkwardly beside the laughing Carters. On the back, written in neat handwriting, were the words, "We're proud of you. Thank you for showing us who you really are." It was signed Vanessa. Amara smiled softly, placing the photo in her drawer. Forgiveness, quiet and complete, filled her heart. She had conquered not just an empire, but bitterness itself. In the years that followed, Amara became more than a businesswoman. She became a legend. Universities taught her story. Documentaries featured her journey. And countless young women named their daughters after her. But if you ever asked Amara what her greatest achievement was, she'd say it wasn't the $1 billion. It was learning that peace is more powerful than pride. One evening, as she sat on her balcony, the same balcony where her story began, she watched the sunset melt into the city skyline. The laughter that once haunted her memory had turned into music. The pain that once held her down had turned into purpose. Her phone buzzed with Another call, a reporter wanting an interview about her success. Amara smiled and declined politely. She didn't need the spotlight anymore. Her life was the story. She whispered to herself, Mama was right. One day they'd choke on their laughter. Then she laughed softly, not at them, but with the joy of knowing she had risen beyond everything that was meant to break her. Her heart was free, her legacy secure, and her faith unshaken. To everyone watching her journey unfold, her voice echoes through the screen, calm yet powerful. Never let anyone tell you that your color, your background, or your silence defines your limit. You are not here to fit in their world, you are here to create your own.